So, welcome Jesse V. Johnson to World of Martial Arts Television to talk about Boudica. What a film about the almost mythical yet very real warrior queen who nearly 2,000 years ago led an army of British tribes against the obscenely cruel Roman occupation. It's incredibly different to Avengement, Debt Collector, Hell Hath No Fury. How did you come to make this movie? Feels a very different sort of thing for you.
Different, but it's a continuation, of themes, I think. And I had this script that I had attempted to finish and attempted to lick and attempted to sort of get made for probably about a decade or more, actually more than that, because it'd been lingering a long time. And it was the story of Boudica. And it was something I knew I felt very, very passionate about and wanted to do. It was a story that, for some reason, I'd been drawn to since I was a kid, and sort of had seen the statue and learned a little bit about her plight. And there was something so terribly heartbreaking about it, but so justified in what she did. And that's an interesting thing. To articulate what it was that truly drew me to the character, I'm not entirely sure. Perhaps an amalgam of the English character sort of messed up and put together in this character that typified something that frustrated me. But anyway, I couldn't finish the script. It was you have this middle act which was very, very difficult to handle. It's not really made for cinema or TV, or it's unfilmable if you did it even remotely close to what actually happened. And so this half-written script had sort of languished for about a decade. And after working with Olga, I had a sense of perhaps being able to come up with a way of finishing it, perhaps being there was something there that could work, that she was an actress of range and depth and emotion who could bring that, and perhaps there was enough there that would inspire me to come up with a way to finish it, to handle that middle act, to handle that sort of switch. And I took the script out and read it, and it sort of came to me as and once I had figured out how to handle that dramatically, the rest of the script was very, very quick, and it wrote itself pretty efficiently because it was a subject matter I'd been deeply researching for a long, long time, attempting to work out how to finish it. So, yes, in many ways it is different to the other films I've done, but in many ways it is the absolute essence of the other films I've done as well, in that it deals with the human character, a normal person, not necessarily a person who's a martial artist or an ex-special forces or any of these other hitmen on the run, just a normal person who's pushed to the very brink of their sanity to get redemption, of a sort. And this is something that I find rather interesting, And if you think of Avengement, he's really a normal sort of fella. His brother was the gangster. He was a very normal kind of guy, and actually quite nice, who was pushed to becoming what he came by spending time wrongly in prison, and so it's not terribly dissimilar if you look for a theme. I wouldn't look for a theme, and I hate to ever think that I was making films with the same theme over and over. Although I think there was a director who said every director makes the same film over and over. But I'm not that one, hopefully. So it was really working with Olga again that triggered the script, and it got finished. And then it was a strange sort of, I went to, funnily enough, the finances, of Avengement, who had worked with me before. They loved the idea of doing a film with Olga, but also Ariel Bleiberg, who is the son of Ehud Bleiberg that runs Bleiberg International, with whom I'm friends now after 5 or 6 movies, successful movies, is a big history buff as well, and which is very rare for an American to know anything about Boudica. Most of the time they mispronounce it, misspell it, and misquote it, and have really very little knowledge of her. And that's not any snub against the Americans. It's a very English piece of history, and so it came together well. I did take it out to a few other producers in America, and the overriding reaction was, "But she loses." And is there any way of making her win? Can we have her beat the Romans? So that wasn't going to work. So I kept coming back to Bleiberg. They the budgets are lower, but they give me artistic freedom, and they understood that that this is a film about someone that was important because she didn't win. That's the whole win is it's not the term to use in terms of this. But that's not a spoiler. They got it and they understood it, but it was a subject matter that was tough. As I say, it's absolutely un-American in terms of, you know, following the hero and having them not make it through, you know, alive to the last act. But then it's absolutely American in the underdog coming through and taking on the bigger one. So I don't think of it as a national one, but I think the course of events, looking back on it, sort of makes sense as to how Boudica came to being, and it is sort of an extension of those other movies. But really, it was Olga that triggered it, and working with her.
Olga Kurylenko glows as the warrior queen, and you did create the movie with her in mind. Is there any sense that she is channeling the current situation that's happening in her own country now against the Russian invaders?
I'm aware of that and what she had done, and you know, and how her feelings are, which are very personal to her. You know, I met with her in Paris initially to tell her about the film and pitch it to her and give her some of my drawings and what I told her. I didn't think it would be appropriate. I thought it would be grossly vulgar of a director to say, look, this is exactly what's going on in Ukraine, try and channel that. And that's not what I wanted either. This is not a political film. This has nothing to do with politics. Anyone who knows me knows I'm pretty apolitical. I don't believe in the following of a large group. That's just not my thing. And I wouldn't use something as vulgar as that to create an artistic work. I think that would be wrong. Having said that, she got the similarities and she brought them up and she mentioned them to me. And I found that interesting. But this was a very personal film and based on historical, you know, facts as much as I possibly could. It was tenuous, to be honest, and you know, multiple opinions and different Romans said different things, you know, and they weren't really there. They were there 52 years, you know, talking to people years after the fact, even though people say they were first-hand witnesses. But that aside, I know she was aware of it. I know there was a lot of that in there. But for a housewife with two beautiful daughters, whose main interest in life was looking after those daughters and seeing that they grew up in a healthy, educated, and principled manner, and then getting her nails done, getting her hair done, buying clothing, and enjoying life in very much the same way as a mother and daughters would in today's world, which the more you dig away at Roman society, the more you realize, oh my gosh, this is really a mirror on how we are now. You know, they had special nails, that, you know, nail varnish that was brought in, makeup that was brought from there. You could buy it very expensively. There was perfumes. The way the hair was worn was changing every 6 months to 9 months. The fashions. It was an extraordinarily, similar to how people live their lives now. And we both wanted to touch on that as much as possible. And when it came to the mother aspect of the Queen's character, I lent very heavily on Olga, who's a very good mother. She has a son who and takes that very, very seriously. And I said, look, I'm going to let you, lead the way in this on this part of the film, because this is something you're far more familiar with. I have children, but I'm not a mother, and I wanted it to be as authentic as possible. And there was a lot of, what would you do in this scenario? How do you feel about this? How would you talk to the kids here? Would you grab them? And so I lent very heavily on her, which she enjoyed. I think she really liked having that sort of authorship and agency. But then after the event happens, that was when I felt I could step in, and that's very much my thumbprint on the warrior side. Although, having said that, Olga, by that point in the game, because we shot as close to continuity order as possible, the eyebrows went, there were scars, the hair was very different. There were certain aspects of the character I didn't want to have to flick back to on any given day, or even any given 2 days, for that matter. It was such a deep sort of immersion to make these two people work seamlessly, but not have it become a parlor trick, One is a normal woman that you might run into in Beverly Hills or London or Paris, chattering away with the daughters, and the next one is akin to commando leader, and it's and thinking about how to best punish the enemy, not defeat the enemy, but punish them and teach them a lesson. And this is a slightly different, in English, one wing commando or SAS. This is not what they do. It's not to punish. And what Boudica does is she wants to punish the Romans. She wants to teach them a lesson that will resonate in history, and it really did. It resonated in history literally, and figuratively, if you talk to archaeologists, any of the sites that she burned, there's a layer of black where the sand turned to a black molten glass that they know was AD 61. That was the era that she burned the city, and so she left her mark. And this is something that we both wanted to sort of show the two very, very different sides to her. That was important. We tried to, as I said, we tried to keep politics out of it as much as possible. It was, or we didn't even try it. It wasn't even a factor. Having said that, it's interesting that Olga is Ukrainian, and the Boudica sword, the brass sword that we had specially made, even though it said New York, when I ordered it, actually came from Ukraine as well. It was held up for 6 weeks in Donbass, which I guess is a shipping zone. We'd go online to see how far away it was, and it was it was just dead. It finally turned up in Los Angeles, and then to get it from Los Angeles to England became a trial. But it arrived, I think, something like 12 hours before we started filming. We had the sword, and it was there. It got to the point where we couldn't replicate it and make it sword. It was quite an interesting process. So both Queen and sword were from the Ukraine, for what that is worth.
Coming on to the sword, particularly the way it comes alive in her hands, and it almost feels like it's a reference to King Arthur and Sword in a Stone type of reference. Was that intentional, or was that sort of
100%, completely? I think you're dealing with, when you're dealing with that era of humans, they didn't have a basis for, well, that's real, or that's not real, or that's mythological, that wouldn't happen. This is what really happens in the real. The two worlds interceded and crossed over so much, whether it was pagan religions, Druidism, or the newfound, the new Christianity, or anything else that they followed. There are multiple religions that were coming out of Rome at the time. It would be perfectly normal to have something like that happen. If someone walked through with a cell phone, they would probably be more accepting of that than we would of something we saw, because we are so obnoxiously self-confident in thinking we understand the universe around us, when in actual fact there are things that are indescribable and magical and mythical that happen every day, but we brush them off as coincidence or freaks of nature, or because we are, we live in this strange era of arrogance. But they didn't then, and so a sword that might glow, that might vibrate, that might have a ability to heal itself. This is something that would have been completely possible then. It would not have been outside of the realms of reason. Did it really happen? I'm not sure, but that's certainly how the person that told me it happened.
Well, it works.
He was telling me exactly what he saw. That's sort of what we wanted of the story. And I said, no one must react to anything here as if it's something strange. When she's talking to her children, and there's no one there, we told 35 extras, it's nothing. She's your warrior leader. She's seeing you through. She's seeing you through the most awful times. You're going to let her have the odd idiosyncrasy. That's okay. She does that. I've worked with directors who chew things and make complete fools themselves, but you have 150 people in set who will treat them as if that's absolutely okay. Why? Because they have the personality at that moment, and they are the king in the room, and you let that go. It's part of their idiosyncrasy. Mad as a hatter, but he directs a great movie. And this is military. I've heard stories of warrior leaders who carry umbrellas into combat, or wear bow and arrow on their backs. It's silly things, but it's the soldiers let them off with it, because not only was it odd, but it set them apart, and it gave them something to talk about. And I think it was important to me that nothing was handled. No one said anything, wow, that's magical. I think one of the characters says, did you just see what I saw? And they said, yeah, don't worry about it. He said, okay, then I won't worry about it. I thought that was the best way to handle the magic happening. We write things off very, very quickly. If you took 30 people in a train that had never seen never seen a cell phone before, and someone walked in with a cell phone and started talking on it, and one person said, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, reading the newspapers." That we are humans. We don't like to jump around, point and scream and make fools of ourselves. If everyone else is sort of taking something, we go along with it. And I felt that was, so we talked to the cast about that a lot ahead. So yes, the sword was magical, but it was just one of those other things that happened when Boudica was around. Things were a little odd when she was there, but boy, she was a warrior leader. She was doing things that no one done before.
So sort of referring back to sort of the grittiness of Avengement and the sort of street qualities of debt collecting and that sort of stuff. Yet this Boudica, it's beautifully, sumptuously shot with sort of definite. To me, it feels like to Gladiator, particularly the beginning of the film where it's all sort of idyllic, bucolic, lovely life that then is so tragically changed. Was that an intentional thing, or was it just sort of happenstance?
Thank you very much. Those are lofty films to look like. I mean, it was. I painted the imagery in this film. I did that when I first did my first short movie years ago. I storyboarded the whole film, and then got frustrated because somewhere along the line the screen direction changed, which meant the rest of the script was the rest of the storyboard, which had taken me days to do. The characters were all pointing the wrong way in the conversations, and I had to keep saying, no, they're looking the other way, don't worry. And we'd have second unit DPs that were setting up shots, and everything was. And so from that point on, I said, I will never storyboard the whole movie or sketch pictures again or do anything. I'll just do them very quickly the night before with overheads, which I like, and I move very quickly with those. And if anything changes, you simply redo it, and you don't feel it. But on this film, I went back to what I'd done for my first movies, which was painting with watercolors, with sketch, pencils, and drawing these from the makeup through to the sets. And I knew that the beginning of the film, when she was the queen and the mother, was going to have a particularly golden green hue to it. And I worked with Jonathan Hall, who's a tremendous DP that I've worked, cinematographer I've worked with many times, and we pulled a lot of references and said, look, everything's going to be greener than usual, lush, alive, full of promise and richness. You could reach up into the tree and grab a fruit out of it and eat it. That's, they're pushing flowers where they weren't, and which wasn't difficult because it was that beautiful English summer when, in the shade, everything just grew. There were bluebells and the succulents, and it was, breathtaking. When you never see it, you also remember England as being this way. We got extraordinarily lucky because of where we shot. And then after the act happens, we knew that we wanted to turn that on its head as much as possible, and and things would be browner, dirtier, darker, and it sounds basic describing it now, but we tried to put as much thought into that as possible, and really show the progression from a visual and color standpoint, so that the audience, even if they didn't quite put their thumb on what was going on, they could feel the descent into this darkness that comes with her sort of journey. And he's very good at that. And then color correction was wonderful. We had a spectacular company in Los Angeles that did wonderful work with that and really got in. We could color sections of sky and help with clouds and give them richness, which was I've never really done it to that degree before, and it was fun to work that way. With the pictures, as I'm sure you're aware, the Debt Collectors and the Avengement, these pictures were shot in 3 weeks, 18 days, and they're out there, and you're doing the equivalent of the other guys that are working on that same budget are, the films are there's considerably less care shown for them. So it was nice to do something where it was truly about how the film looked and really sink all of those sort of underlying visual traits into it. So thank you for noticing. I
believe you shot it on location, a tough call in any place, and it was Suffolk, but what was it like being in Suffolk, it being the land where it actually happened?
Initially, we were aware that it was close to, which is very close to Sutton Hoo, and that part of England is very rich in a wonderful history, especially military history. But as we sort of started, building and the chronologue and sort of scouting the various areas around where he'd been, he brought me a big box and said, these are Roman artifacts that my family have found over the years, ploughing the fields, and there were little coins and bits of glass and sort of good luck charms and the realization that we're actually very, very close to where she may have galloped and slept and camped and raided became quite apparent, and it had a sort of profound effect on me. And not that it influenced the film. We didn't choose to shoot there because of that reason. There were multiple reasons that saw us filming in this property, but it added to the sense of responsibility. You're taking a historical character, an actual person, responsible to my characters as possible. I don't want to make them look foolish. This is not about a quick money grab. This is not about, you got to make a movie because we got to fill a time slot here and make that work over there. There are movies that exist like that. I've worked on them. I've done a lot of films as a stuntman. I've done a lot of films as an assistant director and a second unit director. This was a film that I felt I owed this burden of responsibility. And there was a reason it had taken 20 odd years to get the film together and financed and ready to go. And I didn't want to do something that would make her look wrong, that would let her down. And I think by being where she had perhaps been, and maybe it's an English, Irish sentimental kind of thing, where you read messages and mythology into everything, but certainly it made me feel a lot more honor bound to treating her legend as well as I possibly could, as truthfully and as responsibly as I could. So we were shooting there, and I think that spread amongst a lot of the crew. It certainly did to Olga. We talked about it at quite length, and it reached a pinnacle. Actually, not at Julian's property at Bentwaters, which is an old military base, and ancient oak wood. And you walk around there, and you feel the history of England seeping through you, the smells and the looks, and you realise this. You could have been someone 2,000 years ago, and their view and their smell and what they were treading on would have been very, very similar to what you had right there, almost identical. And we're giving Olga has to give the speech to the Iceni, or the gathered Celts in the final sort of battle, the push against the Romans, and raised the sword and started yelling the speech and giving it fabulous performance. And there was a low rumble behind her, the thunder built up, and then lightning strike, and it cracked as she gave the speech. And we cut, and she came to me and said, "Did you made the thunder, right? That was you?" I was like, "No, I didn't at all." And it was one of those moments where there was not really much more to talk about, because you didn't really want to ruin it in your mind. We moved on to the next take. The thunder never came again. But there were little moments like that through this shoot that really, really made it rather special, And so you ask, how was it filming so close to where she may have lived? The answer is so sort of difficult to explain, but I think it helped an immense amount. I think it gave us all a little bit of picked us up a little bit and said, "You're doing something a little special here. Do your best, see what you can. Don't rush a shot. Don't get in there and just shoot it." Which I try not to do ever, but it's she was like perhaps another executive producer standing behind us.
A quick question on, you have an outstanding cast: Clive Standen, Rita Tushingham, James Faulkner, amongst others. But Nick Moran as the baddie, I thought he was superb as the Roman general, if he's a general, Catius Decianus. How did you get him to find his character sort of almost wickedly enjoying his sort of cruelty?
I called and offered Nick a part I thought he would hate. I thought he did not want to play the bad guy for me. Nick's desperate to play a really good heroic role again. He deserves it. He's a phenomenal actor, a wonderful human being, extraordinarily intelligent, incredibly talented, far more talented than I am as a writer and a director and an actor. And I'm in awe of him, working with him. I sent him the script. He instantly said, "Yes, I'll do it." And he said, "Which part?" And I said, "Catius Decianus." And he said, "Oh my God, I was so hoping that was what you were going to ask me." So backstory is he was set to, they had Jude Law was going to play Commodus in Gladiator. Jude Law had not heard of Russell Crowe and said, "I'm not doing a film with this unknown Australian," and backed out. There was a huge rush to find the actor to play Commodus in Ridley Scott's Gladiator. It went out across London. Nick Moran was the front contender at that time. He was a big name. He had just finished Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. He went through several different callbacks. He met Ridley Scott. He went deep into this part and felt he knew it better than anyone else and was very, very good at it. A change of events happened. It went to Joaquin Phoenix. The rest is history. But Nick has carried this in his heart ever since then. And I asked him the exact same question. I said, "How are you doing this so well? Where is it coming from? Where you were born to play this part?" And he said, he told me the story, and he went into this in great detail, more detail and far more funny and erudite than I am. But it was a beautiful story, and by the end of it, I felt that was a really good, comeuppance for him. And he came back and he got to play this part. And I think it's a better part than Commodus anyway. I think he came with a ferocious willingness to do a really, really good job and to blow everyone else out of the water and show what he could do with that part after 20 years of sort of harboring it. Actors do that. They create a part. They have to create backstory. They have to learn the lines. It's not just repeating something you've learned. I mean, this, of course, but you get deeply involved in a part like that when you're reading for someone like Ridley Scott. You're going to do enormous research. You're going to make sure there's there's onion layers to him when you're in there reading in front of him, and that character's been in him waiting to come out. So he burst forth like Alien, in the other Ridley Scott movie, and he came out and saw him come to life. So I found it really exciting to hear that. I didn't know until he told me sort of midway through, and then it all sort of the dots joined together, so to speak. Yeah.
Cool.
I love when he meets her on the path and gives that speech to her. The lighting there was crazy. The light that was, coming through the trees. It was really quite eerie.
Eerie, yes.
Yeah. There's something wonderful about it. There's a couple of moments when you're making historical pieces like this, and you've deeply immersed yourself in the period. You've read all the books. You've got reenactors there. You've had long meetings over coffee with, talking about what would and what wouldn't. You've watched other movies, documentaries. I find the books the best because for some reason I retain information from a piece of paper with, maybe it's the generation I came from, but certainly having these people there. So you've immersed yourself in it, and you're standing in the middle of the woods surrounded by Roman soldiers, and Boudica's there. And there's something magical about that. It's the most incredible way to make a living. You're time traveling, with these beautiful creatives, and you're there to do something to entertain. It is just wonderful. So I hope people enjoy this movie. I truly do. I've put an enormous amount into it, and at the end of the day, I feel there's not much more I could have done. I left it all out there. There wasn't any stone left unturned. The budget was not as huge as we'd all have liked, and it was draining and grueling. But I think what we managed to pull off, I'm very proud of. So,
How did you train the actors and choreograph the fight scenes? Obviously, the Roman legionaries were hugely impressive in their gorgeous kit. Did they come back ready in that they knew how to fight in formation, that type of thing? And then how did you train the Britons on the other side to fight a shield wall and do what they had to do? Because that looked all incredibly convincing and wasn't sort of just put together. It looked like they were really going at it.
Funnily enough, the guys that I had on Avengement were Dan Stiles, who's an English stunt coordinator, has a wonderful team and network of stunt men in UK and Ireland. And then I brought Luke Lafontaine, who's my regular collaborator from the US, to England. They'd worked together previously on Avengement, and then Dan had also done Accident Man and One Ranger for me. Luke had also done all of the US films I did. So when I put their heads together, they argue with each other a lot, but they come up with really, really interesting, creative ideas and solutions, and get very involved in training the guys and researching and outfoxing the other person on what they've discovered and what they've found and what particular sword technique was used and could be utilized in the film. And it becomes like a game, almost bordering on nerdish, as to Luke's father worked for the Metropolitan Museum in New York, and so he deeply ensconced in and brought up in that way of critically thinking about how weaponry was designed around what use it was intended for. And he has a line of knives that he created for cold steel, which are the LaFontaine knives, which bear his name and are quite expensive. I asked for one for free and he wouldn't give it to me. But he brings that sensibility to it. He's worked with me a long time and knows intrinsically what I want of a scene and how hard I want to push, and that I never want the action or the gore or the particular weaponry that's being. I never want that to outshine my cast. The most important thing is what's going on in the eyes of the cast and where they are. Everything else should be secondary to that. You can and he likes that, and so he did some of the best second unit I've had directed for me on this one. I was very impressed with what he put together. We went through everything in detail. He knew the history, as did Dan. They worked with the reenactors. They had access to the same books that I brought to do research, and they trained the actors ahead of time in cardio and how to use the sword the way they would have done, and the particular techniques and where the kill zones were, and what and also to be careful of anachronisms and in technique, and then the actors took that upon themselves. Olga very rarely rehearses. She's a very quick study and likes to watch her stunt double work through it, and then Olga will step in and do it. But it's very complicated on this one because Olga is so energetic. She's so much fury she brought to the role. It became very difficult for the stunt double to keep up, and So we tried to use Olga wherever possible to do her own stuff, because she just became this furious ball of sort of energy. It didn't hurt anyone, but it's just a theatrics that is not very easy to replicate. But yeah, she it was a good sport where she was in there, she was training, and she was hitting the ground and rolling and fighting and sweating, and having to be reminded to breathe as she was doing all the fight scenes, and really got into it, which is great. I tried to distance myself from that. I spent decades as a stuntman, and I loved it, and it was wonderful to me. I made a lot of money doing it and enjoyed it and got to work with some fantastic people. But at this point in where I am in my journey, it's all about the story and the performance and focusing on those guys. I didn't like directors who got too involved in the action when I was doing action. So I explain what it is. I pass it across. I watch the videos that they shoot of the rehearsals in great detail. We discuss that. We talk about it. And when they come to set to direct, unless I see something truly going wrong, I let them do it, because they have their own method at that point. They've worked with those stunt guys on that sequence for a couple of weeks. For me to jump in and then say, no, do it this way, change that over there. You could harm someone, it could throw it off, it could not look realistic. Although sometimes it is just fun to do that, regardless.
Well, speaking of fun and strange things, it wasn't a tank and it wasn't an RPG or anything like that. What was it like working a ballista into the fight action? So that was a key thing that.
Yeah, it was really key, and we had to talk an awful lot about it. Is it an arrow that hits people and they fall over like in John Wayne movies, or what does it do? And we went out and had a look at what ballistas did when they fired, and this great big bolt, and if it hit you, it's awful. I don't think physics works quite the same way, but it's a movie as well, but it certainly would wrench you off your feet. In movies you see people hit with a shotgun and go 8 or 10 feet. Now, if you were holding the shotgun, by laws of Newton, you'd also go back. So there's things that don't quite work oftentimes. But with artistic license, I think the size of the bolt and the power behind it, the kinetic energy of it hitting, I think it would knock you flying. It would take you to pieces. It would disembowel and hurt. And what I didn't want to do with this was a disservice to anyone by sort of mimicking that warfare with steel swords is anything but the most viciously brutal thing imaginable. You get hit with a piece of sharpened metal with the intent of killing you. This is awful. This is beyond description. I would rather not be shot or killed or hurt at all in battle. I'd like to die peacefully, but I would certainly prefer to be hit by a sniper's round than hit by someone, hitting me with what was probably blunt by that point, because it'd been used as many times as he could until I stopped moving, or he felt he was exhausted and could move on to the next person. If you think of the sheer brutality of it, if you read in PTSD, it's this close combat which affects you the most. The man who presses the button being the least, all the way through to the person who has to stab the other person with a bayonet being the worst. You are. This is what they did, and I didn't want to weaken that. It had to be shown. It had to be felt, especially by that point in the movie. It was intrinsic that it was not handled in a way that it's people on stage combat touching the swords at the top and then turning and doing the points of the compass and then whoosh, a nice bloodless stab in the heart and he falls down and wants the next guy. This is not what sword fighting is about. It absolutely is the embodiment of the term. You have a great plan until you meet in combat, and it all goes out the window. There is no plan. No plan survives combat. And this is what it is. You just hit at any opening that you could see.
Which brings it to the sort of another question. Thought is that end fight scene when it all comes the sort of together. Has a whiff of Tarantino, but much more that sense of Peckinpah you mentioned earlier, and that sense of awful, violent element of glory to it, because they are wreaking what they can on the Romans. But was that me reading into it, or were you channeling a bit of Peckinpah and Cross of Iron?
I adore Peckinpah. I love him. I do like Cross of Iron. My favorite is the least popular amongst people, but you have to be a Peckinpah aficionado to love it, is Ring with the Head of Alfredo Garcia.
Yes.
Peckinpah was my film school. I was working as a PA on Shawshank Redemption and realized I wanted to make a career of this. And I bought the first biography I bought was a Samuel Peckinpah one. I have 11 of them now. I adore Peckinpah. You know, every single one of his biographies has this terrible, sad last act, of course, which breaks your heart because it was it drove himself into the asphalt. But Tarantino I love as well. I think you have to be very careful of ever touching that territory because the moment you step there, it instantly becomes, he's got such a signature on all of his work, which is glorious and wonderful and fantastic to watch. But you don't want to copy it. You don't want to even be inspired by it. You have to put that stuff aside. I love Peckinpah. To say that had reeked into my work in some way would be obvious and I would imagine it. But I didn't really want to copy anyone. I didn't really feel inspired by any other movie but the books that we were reading on what warfare was like at that time. And there were certain images that I had in my head, her kneeling, chopping the sword off, and standing and facing them, that were images that had sort of clouded and come into your head. But, the truth of the matter is, if you watch enough movies, they've, where your real memories, converge with what you've watched or read over the years becomes very difficult to make distinction of. And I think you have to be very careful what you watch if you're a filmmaker, especially one, who works slightly on the edge of emotions and as I do. And it's like, I try to immerse myself in an older era of movies, 50s and 60s and 80s, maybe 80s, but really just live in there. Robin and Marion, I loved watching, was a huge influence on this one. And because then if anything finds its way into your work, it's less obvious, this whole sentence reeks of plagiarism. But the point is, if you're going to let stuff seep into your work, which you really have no control over, try and make it Ford, try and make it Richard Lester, try and make it Raoul Walsh, Hawks, these Kazan, Kurosawa, these great masters. And for me, that's a safer ground. And that stuff plays, interviews with them play on my YouTube nonstop in my room. People think that, it's TV going, but it's literally interviews with Bud Boudica, with Ford, with John Huston talking, and just listening to their voice, talking about how they did this, and then clips from the movies. I find that exciting. I also think it's truly important that the filmmaker watch what your contemporaries are doing, but it's really dangerous territory, especially around a movie. Cross of Iron, I adored. I loved it. I thought it was. Maybe there were some elements. You mean the actual blood squibs and things like that, and the smoke behind them?
That, and also the sense of fate, and the sense that it was just.
Absolutely. Take you where the iron crosses grow. That one. It's I think if there were a comparison of that, it's that on this tableau of violence and tiger tanks and Russian tanks fighting with each other, that was a story about two men. One man who was a hero but hated it, and one man who was not a hero and hated that. And that you have this whole film, that is really, it's about those two guys, and all the rest of it is color to it. And Peckinpah at his finest is this human thing, drama, original, interesting, tangible, set. And the blood squibs and the bullet hits and all these people falling over. That's something that he felt he had a fingerprint on. But it's that wonderful, beautiful thing. So if you compare me to Peckinpah, I'll take that as an enormous compliment, because at its heart, Boudica is about a mama.
That's what I mean. It's about her trying to return something back to them, and then and she knows she's not going to escape it. She can't.
No, it doesn't matter at that point anyway. Yeah. She's found out where the kids were. She's it's all fine. I had shots in the original script of Prasutagus in his horse galloping and surrounding her, and seeing her in the battle, and she realized he's there and the kids. But it all becomes a bit heavy-handed. We did it with a little teeny flashback. But yeah, it's about she's made her mark by that point. She's done what she needed to do. She's honored the family and made payback, and that's what it is. So hopefully the small story, we all are interested in those, and people talk about epics all the time. Make the big vista, have all the people there, have as many buildings fall down as possible, and superheroes going through it, and that would be epic. It's not. The greatest epics were small stories told on big characters. Lawrence of Arabia, Dr. Zhivago, these were small stories, beautiful, almost bordering on soap in some respects, but something in the character was slightly different, and it was big enough that it could be told on an epic and still hold scope. It's we get confused by what we're seeing so much with a tentpole movie that has so much money thrown at it that the audience, the filmmakers feel they need to give the audience their money's worth. But the truth, we are interested in small stories. We're interested in what our neighbor did, and why have they got, a different dog now? What happened to the other dog suddenly that disappeared? This is more interesting to us than because we are human. These are stories told around a campfire, and the flickering flame on our face is the movie screen.
Which brings us to the final question: is you're in Italy doing something by the Mediterranean? You can't talk about it, but is it something we're going to see soon? Is it something that's going to be?
It's a TV show. I've signed an NDA, so I can't talk about it. But I'm in all of the places where Boudica's enemy would have lived, and enjoyed their lives and talked about their troubles in England or Britain, as they would have called it, and that a faraway isle that actually provided some quite nice gold and tin and resources. But yes, we're in magnificent locations. I've been through the Dolomite mountain range, from Hungary to the Dolomite Mountains to southern Italy now, and go to Rome and Cinecittà, and then up to the Gran Sasso and Monte Cassino, and then back into Hungary. So it's a pretty incredible trip. Although I'm working 14-hour days, yelling and shouting, and when I get in my hotel room, you just fall asleep under the covers and get up. But it's nice to look out the window at all the people enjoying swimming in the sea.
Well, thank you, Jesse, for taking the time to talk about Boudica. Thank you for making a brilliant film. I hugely enjoyed it, and I look forward to talking to you about your next things, and hope everything goes well in Italy.
Thank you very much for a wonderful and kind interview, and I really appreciate the support, and I hope people dig it.
They will. If they don't, then something wrong with them.
All the very best. Have a great day.